when they make a change, that change is part of an automation process. It cannot be ad hoc changed. If something gets put into the system, it gets put into the system, and that's the way approval matrix will work.
Hi, I am Guru Venkatesan, and I would like to welcome you all to this episode of Clause and Effect, a podcast series presented by Simply Contract. Joining us today is Rohit Kumar, an industry and a legal expert with over 20 years of experience in dealing with M&As and corporate law. Rohit is a global General Counsel at UPL Limited, a leading global provider of sustainable agricultural products and one of the world's largest companies that offer crop protection solutions. Rohit is responsible for managing a large, multinational, geographically spread legal team and focuses on mergers and acquisitions, contracts and contract management, and broadly speaking, safeguarding the firm's interest in strategic disputes. Prior to UPL, Rohit was a corporate lawyer with commercial and transactional legal expertise at Herbert Smith Freehills and J. Sagar Associates, leading law firms in Australia and India. Rohit, we're glad you could join us today on this podcast. I'm super excited to take an in-depth look into the world of legal operations and business contracts with you.
Thank you, Guru. Thanks for the introduction and pleasure to be here.
Great. So, let me start with this. Given that, we've been like 2 years into this, into the CLM product that we have and talking to various GCs and your peer group across the globe. Prior to this, I was on the other side. I was actually the consumer of legal services. I used to lead large sales teams, worked with multiple customers, complex contracting needs, worked with legal operations team across my globe. One thing I could always sense is that well-managed contracts and contracting processes can be a game changer and can be a true value for organizations. UPL and Rohit, you particularly has been one of the visionaries or the thought leaders in implementing a CLM, right? While in my software experience on enterprise applications, I have sold softwares to HR, I have sold softwares to sales, I have sold softwares to marketing. There are not so many software or applications, that addresses the digital transformation of legal processes, right? In a way, I think the tech industry has a lot of tech debt that it owes to the legal community. But within that, I feel you have really transformed UPL into the digital transformation at UPL that I really feel proud about. Any thoughts about what preempted you to look at the CLM adoption probably a few years back, and were there any specific points that you're trying to address that made this transformation for UPL?
Sure. Thanks, Guru. I think that's a deep question. And I think I think that we started evaluating a CLM platform maybe 5 or 6 years back. And as you rightly said, I couldn't find people in my peer group in India or even internationally where I could talk about their experiences on CLM. But, and part of that requirement came from actually need. I mean, if you know UPL or people who know UPL, they know that we are a pretty spread out business geographically. It's an Indian listed company with headquarters in Mumbai, but our 90% business comes from outside of India. And Americas constitute almost 60-70% of our business. So it's a business which is pretty spread out. The legal team which supports the business is also spread out. And I was finding it as the head of the legal team member, I was finding it very difficult to manage risk and manage the legal team in this universe of UPL. And that's when I started thinking about how to marry technology with legal. And that's when we started evaluating and seeing different platforms where this could be done. So that's the genesis of how we started thinking about it.
Excellent. So, one side of one side of the solution is just evaluating and buying a technology, but a lot more goes beyond. How do you look at structuring your team or the legal team? From a legal operations function, how do you look at bringing in a process discipline? And that needs to come top down. You can buy the best of products, you can implement the best of solutions, but it's as good as being put to use and being the discipline of users being come to. Any thoughts or any challenges that you had in the initial days? How well were you prepared? How well was UPL prepared on this implementation journey?
So I think Guru, I think when we started the journey, I was conscious of the fact that I need the buy-in at the top to implement something like this. I don't think anything like this, a CLM, can be implemented unless your top management, your CEO, and the C-suite is convinced or on board on this implementation. It's a lot of hard work, and just getting the right approval matrix, in the sense who can approve what, was a lot of effort. And I think with my other implementation tech, legal tech implementation in the legal department, which did not have as many touch points with different departments within the company, I knew that people always question. Somebody who is used to doing things in a certain manner, and a lot of time that means doing in a manner where you have no accountability. For example, you approve contracts on a phone. You tell your junior colleague that this is approved, go ahead. And when something goes wrong, that senior person will, oh, I didn't understand, I didn't approve it, and probably the junior guy is already gone, he's working somewhere else. So we did come across all that, and when we implemented, I told my C-suite that, look, we will only go ahead on this process if I have the buy-in from all of you. And I was lucky, and I'm lucky to have the senior members of my team or leadership team who understands and knows that on why a CLM is important for a company like UPL. And one of the things I did quite early in the process, I knew that there'll always be questions, particularly in a very, very complex setup like UPL, where you have complex manufacturing plants, you have different geographies, different nationalities. There'll always be question on who can approve what. And people often come to me even now after 3 years of implementation that, oh, you know I, I used to approve all this until now, and why am I not the approver? And to that, we started that journey with the thought process that all the approver matrix will be signed off by the head of the department, the global heads, and will not implement it unless we get a sign off from them. So anybody who comes to us, for example, even now on a change request, we tell them that we are only implementing what got approved. You get a sign off in writing from the HOD, the global head, and we'll be happy to implement that change. And of course, we get coordinated with all the all the business heads, and they know that when they make a change, that change is part of an automation process. It cannot be ad hoc changed. If something gets put into the system, it gets put into the system, and that's the way approval matrix will work. So I think that is one part, and I think just briefly on the other, I don't think I was prepared or knew how much effort will go into implementing this, and not only implementing but training people to come on board, and started the organization to start using it. I think I underestimated the second part. I think all of us as human beings, we ended up putting more pressure on implementation. But that there came a time when I realized that, okay, implementation is actually the easier part. Now comes the training, and how to make sure that people start using it. And there's no two separate systems by which we'll work. There'll be only one, which is the CLM, and no manual. So I think those are some of the learnings I had early in the process.
Absolutely, totally agree, right? So the tone at the top is super important for any such large investments that an organization makes. And it's also about how well you're prepared for such a large scale transformation rollouts, right? Especially, your peer group, your seniors, and your subordinates, everybody aligning to the vision and looking at the long term benefits of such rollouts, then tactically, what would I lose and what would I get? That's, we are going through, as we roll out for customers, we completely see the one that you visualized 5 years back coming into effect now. Moving a little, right? One is the platform and the tool, but if you have to just marry this with some of the common legal mistakes that typically organizations would make, and how do you think something like a CLM can come and help them? Any thoughts around it? Any experiences you want to share, or any feedback you have for people listening to this?
Sure. I think I'll say three things. One, I alluded to that briefly, is the approval matrix. Who gets to approve what? And that's a very, very important aspect of risk mitigation or risk management. You want only specified people to approve at specified transactions, and only in a CLM construct you can have different sorts of approval matrix for different types of transactions, and there could be triggers and all that which can be incorporated as part of that. So I think that's one part. The other one is when you implement it, I think is what comes along with implementation is also standardization. So you are able to standardize your processes, your documents, so which means you know your documents far better. You improve the efficiency for the organization and for the legal team. And the third part, I would think, is the fact. I mean, from a practical standpoint, I had one member in my team whose job would be to chase executed contracts. Contracts which have been reviewed by legal, and it has the final execution version was sent by legal, and we did not get the fully executed version. And I had one person in legal department, not a lawyer, but one of the CLM, or not a CLM, but one of the contract support staff, whose job was just to make sure how to get that contract back. I think with CLM, we just with the press of a button we solved that problem. With electronic signature, we now make sure that every contract which gets where an execution version is produced, the executed version comes and sits back into the CLM. And I think those are the three things which helped us a lot, both as a legal team as well as the organization.
Just alluding on that point, right? One of the other common consistent point that comes across when we talk to customers across the globe is about the need for the so-called an enterprise legal playbook, right? Especially the complexity of UPL, right? You have customers and vendors across the globe, various local laws, various complexities that come in, cultural diversity, the way the contract, this particular clause has been drafted. I'm sure in your own team, somebody in one geography drafting a clause could be very different to some other, counsel drafting the same clause from another geography. So, how do you handle this complexity? Any thoughts about the so-called enterprise legal playbook that you want to share?
Sure. Look, I think we are pretty well spread out geographically. And one thing I've realized is that you cannot, while it's good to pick up the best practices of one and implement it somewhere else, but sometimes you have to give the flexibility to people uh, to do the way things are done in that region. For example, in many of the non-English speaking countries like Brazil, parts of Europe, it's not common to have very detailed contracts. Contracts tend to be smaller, particularly when you're executing an English language. And so, we follow both. We have a global playbook, which is for contracts which gets used globally, but we also let the regions in the UPL universe, the CLM implementation is region wise. It's one is at the HO level, which is where I sit, and then you have different regions. So UPL's business is divided into 8 regions, and all 8 is headed by regional legal teams, and they get to choose how much they need to adopt or adapt from the global playbook, and both in terms of the actual contract language as well as the approval matrix. Because of course, while we give them the flexibility to do the playbook, but we don't want, for example, a region to follow a different template or construct for approval matrix. We want, say, the business side of the region to approve a certain kind of contract, and the person he or she reports to approving certain kind of contracts which is approved by the business side, and that doesn't change. But having said that, we give some level of flexibility to the region to adopt the global playbook into their regional playbooks.
Just adding on a little more on that. So, having implemented a CLM, do you see a tangible ease of managing the approvals with stakeholders, being much well prepared for negotiations of particularly complex long-term contracts or large contract value? Just adding to the point, also to see probably a little bit light on how do you manage the risks and compliances today. Overall, about how do you see this rollout helping you compared to the pre CLM to the post CLM from a GC perspective, because you get a global view of how things used to be prior to it, and how you see it now.
I think, Guru, the first is now accountability can be fixed to people, both in the senior members of the business team, which are approving these contracts, because now we have the ability to go and see if something goes wrong. We have the ability to go and see who approved it. So there is some level of accountability on that. And second is also the accountability on the legal team member, because now everything is assigned, and there is the who does what is easily traceable. So I think that's one, accountability in general. Second is I think I would think efficiency. There has been immense improvement in efficiency in the legal team, because now with the standardization, people prefer to work with our templates, in the legal team, both in the legal team as well as within the bigger UPL in the company with business folks, because they know that if we use our template, things will get done faster, and people understand those documents very well. Legal team doesn't take so much of time to review our draft, and turn around those documents when we receive comments from other side. And similarly, even for the organization, I think it's just more efficient to have a CLM do this in a very complex setup. Third, I would say, is also it has helped us organize how we maintain our contracts. I've seen it, pre CLM days, Guru, where we struggle in finding contracts. We have signed something, we have a dispute, and somebody else has raised a dispute, and we are running around internally, both in the legal team and outside, trying to find where that actual executed version of the contract is, and we couldn't find it. We can't find it. Sometimes we find it's lying with somebody who was leading that negotiation from either the business side or some function within the company. So I think that is largely taken care of with CLM. And I think those are the maybe a few, but yeah, of course, if I go a little bit further, there could be several more. I think maybe I can give an example also, Guru. It's a good, you mentioned about this remote working and pandemic. I think all the audience would be familiar with how pandemic impacted all of our lives and work, and work from home. We it was just providence that we implemented and went live on CLM for Brazil just before the pandemic hit. I think it was around first or second week of February 2020. We went live, and it was the second rollout for us. The first is where you have all the learnings from. So the first rollout is always, in my experience, any platform, it's always complicated, because there's a lot of learning both for the external team which is implementing it, as well as somebody like me who's the sponsor of that project. The second implementation for us was Brazil, and Brazil was, we were very close to having a very efficient system. I won't say 99% or 100%, but we probably were there around 90, 95, 96% it was close to what it was supposed to be. And just within weeks of that implementation, pandemic hit, and everybody was working from home. So when we implemented, some of these senior guys from business and from other functions told me, "Oh, I don't know what you guys have done. Our previous system was so quick. You could send an email and you'll get an approval, and people will work on documents, and it was quicker." And then the pandemic hit, and everybody started working from home. And it became so seamless to work on the CLM because people could then see the advantage it brought to all of us, including my own team, the regional legal head, whom I pushed a lot to implement. She was so happy. I spoke to her after 2 months of implementation. She was raving about it. She said, "Oh, this couldn't have come at a better time." So I had this contrasting experience when we implemented it the HO. When I spoke to one of my senior team members who was actually spearheading the implementation in the HO, she struggled initially because of the first implementation, but and the other side, because of providence and being better prepared, this other team member in Brazil was gungo about how well it helped them. And not only the legal team, even I got feedback from the business teams, and they were happy, very happy about it.
Oh, excellent. So, in fact, on a lighter note, one of the leaders we spoke recently for an engagement, the person said that there are only two places you find contracts in our company. One is in the table drawer or in a shared drive. If you know where it is, you are lucky. Otherwise, God save you. That's the situation of companies who really not been so advanced in terms of looking at digital transformation on the legal side. I think it's you guys have been pioneers, no doubt about it.
So, Guru, I think it's a very important, it's something, this point is very close to my heart. And I think we were also, we were not as bad ever, at least not in the last 7, 8, 9 years of my being here. But now I can tell you this is a struggle I think many large companies have. And I think that's where technology plays a very important role. It has to be an enabler. I keep telling whenever I meet the external the project manager as well as my internal team, that the technology should be such that the user of the technology should actually feel that it's saving me time, it's making me more efficient. So we overcame this 6 months back by implementing the e-sign module and integrating that with CLM. So our initial struggle was that I thought, and maybe we underestimated how incentive systems work. But I thought that people will continue working on manual signatures. But when we implemented e-sign was easy because people could just select who are the authorized signatories, and then leave it, and then things happen on its own, and the agreement comes and sits back into the CLM. So now we have a situation where almost, I would say, 95%, 90 to 95% agreements are getting signed through the e-sign module. We don't have to even make a single call to get those contracts back into our system. So we almost solved our problem just by implementing one right solution into and integrating that with our CLM.
Absolutely. I think that's a real learning on how enterprises truly see value on investing in technology, right? Just another point on that, Rohit, right? One is you spoke about the pandemic, how on the hindsight, the investment on a CLM was really valuable to UPL. Given the current geopolitical with the Ukraine war, a lot of our customers whom we are talking to are so busy occupied assessing the risk within the contracts on how this would turn around. Any thoughts about how a centralized repository, how bringing in contracts into one place with, having them electronically available is making life easier for UPL, at least in the initial days to do?
Sure. I think, Guru, I'll be a little philosophical in responding to this. I think one thing which the pandemic taught all of us is what is essential and what is not essential. And I'm very proud or happy again with Providence that I work in a sector which is essential. We are part of the food value chain, and now marrying that with the sanctions or whatever, the Ukraine and Russia conflict. It's pretty early uh, to see how that's going to impact. I think the swift payment and all that has will impact all of us one way or the other. We have businesses in both the countries, both Russia and Ukraine. It's not large businesses, but we have people, we have offices. It's too early for us to know how sanctions will work. But as of now, those sanctions do not extend to our sector. Agriculture products are exempted, and you can continue to sell. Of course, we'll have to be a little bit careful in structuring those no sales. But as of now, that's okay. We are closely watching it, but that's not something which is directly impacting us till now.
That's really good to know. We wish this war really gets to an end because the world is just coming out of the pandemic, life is getting back to normal, and then we are hit with another political situation. We hope that the world is becoming hopefully, it becomes a much better place for all of us. Thank you so much, Rohit, for all the insights. UPL and you particularly have been really raising the bar when it comes to digital transformation on the legal tech and with the investments that you're making in just not on CLM, on multiple other areas where you can really see an automation that's needed on the legal side. One of the lighthouse for people in the domain, I would say particularly. It's been a privilege for us to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for all the time and the insights, Rohit.
Thank you, Guru. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you.
So, listeners, that was Rohit Kumar sharing with us insights on the kind of impact a contract management solution can have on large scale global organizations. From creating an enterprise playbook, defining the approval metrics, mitigating risks, and improving efficiencies, largely a CLM can surely be a game changer for multinational organizations. Those were some great stories of victories and struggles Rohit had on his professional journey. We have many such interesting conversations with industry leaders in the upcoming episodes. Stay tuned and catch us on the next episode of Clause and Effect. Subscribe to our podcast and visit simplycontract.com for more information.